Welcome to Zumbro Online. My name is Pastor Rob, and I'd like to say thank you for joining us in this space. We hope that you find this message meaningful. If so, we would like to make you aware that there are other resources currently online, and even more coming in the future. Also, if you're in the area, please know that no matter who you are or where you've been, regardless of who you voted for or who you love, you are welcome here at Zumbro Lutheran Church. If you'd like to financially support this ministry, simply go to our website, click on the Give button in the upper right-hand corner, click on the Give Now button, and select the radio and stream sponsors option on the drop-down menu. Thank you again for joining us here in this space. And now, on to the sermon. So how many of you use streaming services to watch TV? By show of hands. Now, how many of you still don't really do that, but you still use cable or satellite or something not like that? All right, so yeah, most of us stream. So, right, that's been a shift that we've seen mostly in COVID-ish, right? I mean, once kind of there was lockdown, we started turning to these streaming channels because you could do what? You could binge like an entire season. Not even an entire season. You could binge an entire show, like 11 seasons of Friends over a week, right? I mean, anybody? Okay, that was just me. But we really got into the whole streaming thing, mostly because of that, right? You could access all the shows at any time. You could binge the entire show or at least an entire season. But the other part that was beautiful, and still is to some degree, about the whole streaming phenomenon is that, you know, for $9 a month, you got this stuff, and you didn't have to see any commercials whatsoever. Can I get an amen? Right? I mean, it was great. You could just watch. No commercials, nothing. None of that kind of stuff. And then within a couple of years or so, you know, the powers that be kind of found out that, you know, if you pay a huge amount of money premium, sure, maybe there's no commercials, but for the most part, there's a next tier down where it's maybe only $5 or $9 a month, but you still get commercials. And of course, the free version, you get a ton of commercials because they're trying to figure out how to sell you stuff because it's those sponsors that are paying for that show. And so even though you have streaming services now, there are commercials all the time, like on Hulu. Like, I think there's two different levels of Hulu. We don't have the top one. We have the medium one because it's generally fine. But my wife and I are streaming stuff, this one particular show, and it's always broken up with commercials. And not just any commercial, it's broken up by one product in particular, and it's 4 or 5, 6 different versions of the same commercial. Now, we're about to watch one of those commercials, but my disclaimer is this. I am not showing this commercial at all to make any comment about the product or people that use it. Let me say that again. I'm not showing the commercial to say any comment whatsoever about the product or people who use it. That's not the point. I'm showing the commercial because of what the underlying philosophy is, which is something I want to talk about later. So we're going to watch this entire 1-minute commercial. Go.
I'm Javi, I'm 31, and I'm a fitness instructor. I saw myself in a photograph, and we were all smiling, and I looked closer, and I was like, that's what everybody sees? I'm back, and I got Botox Cosmetic. The lines were so prominent, it's all I saw in the photograph. So now when I take photos and I see myself in photos, it's me. I just have fewer lines.
Botox Cosmetic is FDA approved to temporarily make frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better. The effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Do not receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow, eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Tell your doctor about your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, and medications including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
So the commercial is 30 seconds, actually. And then it's 30 seconds of disclaimers. Be careful if you use it or fill in the blank. And I thought, you know, all of this gets streamed all over the world now, so if I only show part of it and seem to be not, showing a product where I don't put the disclaimers, I didn't want to get in trouble, so I showed the whole thing. But again, this isn't being shown because of the product or the people that use it. There's something underneath this commercial and almost all commercials that is the point that I want us to think about today. But before we get there, I'm going to have our reader come up and read for us the reading of the day.
Our reading this morning is from the 13th chapter of Revelations. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its fatal wound had been healed. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" The beast was given a mouth, speaking arrogant and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to speak blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to wage war on the saints and to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. Holy wisdom, holy word.
So here we are 2/3 of the way through the summer, which means we're 2/3 of our way through this series where we've been reading the book of Revelation, and the series is called Apocalypse, right? Because we read the book of Revelation or you hear about that book and it's all about apocalypse. But we don't often unpack that word, so don't go to the next slide yet. But anyone here that's in Club Z or confirmation, what does the word apocalypse mean? Anybody here? I'm scanning, maybe not. All right, anybody else? What does the word apocalypse mean? Lifting the veil, or to reveal. Lifting a veil is actually kind of but to reveal is where you get the word revelation. So contrary to the concept that apocalypse is, apocalyptic movies or apocalyptic literature, which is destructive and dark, it's the end of times, it's all of that kind of stuff, which is true, Revelation isn't about the end of times as we're often taught. It's about that which is revealed, that which comes next. When the veil of whatever exists now is lifted and we see something new or for the first time. And so it's a different kind of lens. It's actually the original kind of lens, but we've certainly gone pretty dark on the book of Revelation with all the end times theology, and so that's usually where we go. But that's not really the meaning of the title of the book or the purpose of it. It's about revealing something that we maybe don't yet see within the world in which we live. And what's hard about the book of Revelation, right, is we can only preach on a few verses here or there. You can't really get the whole book. You really need to study the whole thing. And so there, in this reading that we had today, there's so much I could talk about, right? There's so many different perspectives. There's so many different things you could unpack. So I'm just going to pick a little bit and focus in on it, and the rest of it I just don't have time to deal with. And so we're going to talk about what I think is kind of the scariest part, which is the beast. Right? It's this idea of the beast, right? There's a dragon, there's a beast. The dragon gives the beast authority, and the text goes like this that I want us to focus in. I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 crowns on its horns. And then you skip a little bit, and it says this: the whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. Right, so everyone's going to worship this beast. Everyone's going to follow this beast. And let's face it, the word beast is a pretty scary word. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's not good. But to unpack what this means, we actually need to focus in, I think, on those numbers a bit. Now, the reality is, as I said before, I'm not a big numerologist. Like, I don't think there's a deep, kind of crazy meaning in numbers in the Bible and some secret code. But when it comes to the Hebrew tradition, numbers do have meaning. You can't ignore that, right? I mean, the 12 tribes and 12 disciples, or the number 4, for example, right? There are numbers that are used because they carry with it meaning within that culture. And the numbers in this text can't be ignored either. In fact, I think you need to pay attention to them to understand what's going on. And the number's 10, right? 10 horns, 7 heads, 10 crowns. So let's unpack those numbers. We're going to start with the number 10. The number 10 in the Hebrew tradition has something to do with the idea of something being complete, right? Not complete meaning kind of finished or the whole thing, like the entire law is. If you read all of it, it's complete. So like, God tested Pharaoh 10 times. That means that was all of the tests. Or Israel tested God in the book of Numbers 10 times in the wilderness. Or Daniel is tested for 10 days. Or there are 10 commandments, right? The entire law. 10 has this sense of this is all of it. The whole process. It's the whole deal. And it's nuanced a bit. It makes sense when these two numbers are put together, 10 crowns or 7 whatever horns, because 7 is just, it's tweaked a little bit. The number 7 is more like the word wholeness, where 10 is complete, meaning all of the things or the whole test or the whole challenge. 7 is wholeness, and it's more spiritual wholeness. And when you talk about spiritual wholeness, it's not like it has boundaries or borders entirely. It's just a spiritual wholeness, which is why in the Hebrew tradition, that's the number that's used to talk about the whole of God's intention or love, right? Which is why weekly, the 7th day is holy rest. Monthly, the 7th month is Yom Kippur. That's the day all of the Hebrew people are forgiven in one big celebration on one day. Passover, right? For 7 weeks after Passover is the tradition of Shavuot, which is the tradition where the law is delivered, and you can't do one without the other. Passover is about deliverance, and once delivered, you understand how you are to live, right? It's the whole of the thing. And Jubilee, which is probably the biggest of all, it's 7 sevens or 7 times 7, right? It's that number 7 of wholeness, that spiritual kind of wholeness, but you do it times 7, that's 49, and Jubilee always happens on the 50th year. And it's such a profound number that on the 50th year, in the year of Jubilee, that is when everything is reset. All debts, all land, everything goes back in. So everything's basically redistributed. That's the idea. But it's also when all sins are forgiven, when all slaves are freed. It's a complete and total reset, Jubilee is. But it never happened, by the way. And the reason it never happened is, for us, that would mean you'd have to put your 401k, your retirement, your pension, sell your house and sell your land. You'd have to put it all into one pot and equally distribute all of it. There's a reason we don't like that kind of jubilee, right? But it's the physical living out of all debts, all sins being forgiven. You're all on the same place. That's what Jubilee is. It never happened. But that's the number 7, wholeness. It's as I wrote on the bottom, everything is as it should be. It's God's rhythm. It's God's intention. Okay, so here you have this beast, 10 horns and 7. So it looks like this beast is everything that's complete about the law and the way things should be numerically and kind of structurally and then spiritually as well, wholeness, because it's got these numbers 10 and 7. But it's also a beast, which right at the top, well, if it's a beast, like I said, well, that's a pretty scary thing. So there's something off here. The reader who knows those numbers and the word beast just kind of makes you go, well, wait a minute. Something doesn't quite line up, which is why you have to read the rest of the chapter. I only had us go through a few verses. I didn't read the rest of the chapter. I'm not going to read the rest. I'm going to jump to the bottom because there's a second beast that shows up. And the end of the chapter, of the rest of the reading sounds like this. The second beast shows up, and the second beast, it also forced all people, great and small and rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of humanity. And that number is, yeah, you're not gonna burst into flame for saying it. It's okay. It's not the number of the beast, right? It's the number of humanity. And yes, the other pastors left town and stuck me with this text. Now, like I said, this commercial that I showed you has nothing actually to do with Botox, right? There's no issue here with Botox or its use. I'm sure they're positive, right? It doesn't matter. That's not my point. It's not that at all. But I do want to lift up how it's sold and how other things are sold also, and how the world in which we live, the culture in which we live, tries to sell us things, often by making us feel that somehow we're less than if we don't. The business of this kind of make yourself better, make yourself whole or complete is a $5 trillion business. Now, part of that is good. I mean, it's the weight loss things. I could buy a few products that would help me, right? I mean, we all can be better people. There's nothing wrong with improvement, education, or your health, or these kinds of things. And that's not my point. My point is the philosophy in our culture that drives us to spend so much. It's a philosophy that says, you need to buy this because you don't quite measure up if you don't buy it. You're less than if you don't. You don't, right? I mean, that's our culture. Our culture says we need to be number one. We need to be great. We need to be powerful. We need to be strong. We need to be the best. And if you buy this product, I can help you get there. That's our culture selling us something because it makes us think that we're actually less than. So now look at that number, that Trinitarian 6. The number of humanity. It's like the world is putting upon us, our hands, our foreheads, whatever, that we're just a little short of 7. You don't quite measure up. You're not quite there. Walter Brueggemann said this. He said, the gospel is fiction when judged by the empire, but the empire is fiction when judged by the gospel. See, what we forget when we read books like Revelation is its context. It's written by early Christians in the shadow of Rome, an empire that dictated things, that you needed to be a citizen to get certain kind of rights, and the world is done in a certain way, and these Christians were living completely different. It's kind of like a beast over the sea that calls them less than. But we're not supposed to buy into that. Because if we believe the empire, if we believe the culture in which we live, we are less than. That's why you got to buy all this junk. That's why we separate people. They're not the way they're supposed to be, or not living the way they're supposed to be. They don't look the way they're supposed to be. They don't love the way they're supposed to. They make us feel we're less than unless we fit some kind of predetermined number 7. But when you look at the culture through the lens of the gospel, as Walter says, well, that whole concept is a lie. Because the gospel says completely the opposite. The gospel says, you are just the way you're supposed to be. You are loved exactly as you are. You are included exactly, right? Forgiveness and mercy and grace. There's nothing you need to do or change. You are not less than. God loves you regardless. I mean, that's throughout the story. That's throughout Jesus' words, right? I mean, just to pick out a random few. The story of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, he doesn't know quite who this guy is, but Jesus shows up at his house even though Zacchaeus hasn't even repented yet. Jesus shows up. The adulterous woman, before any kind of, maybe go sin no more is even said, right? Jesus says, I don't condemn you. The prodigal son, this son that's been away and kind of not lived out the way he is supposed to, is welcomed with open arms. None of them are considered less than because of what they've done or who they are. They were welcomed, forgiven, included. And that's not just a Jesus thing. That's the entire Judeo-Christian story from the very beginning. Genesis chapter 1, right? God creates light and says it is. Oh, come on, we can do better than that. It says it is. Day 2, God says it is. Day 3, God says. Day 4, God says it is. Day 5, God said it is. God 6, God creates people and says it is wrong. I got you. God creates people and says it is very good. That's the end of the story, by the way. There's no conditions or caveats, no fixes or upgrades, no products that have to be purchased to get you that last little bit. Very good. We live in a world that wants to tell us that we're less than unless we fit somebody else's definition. You're not quite right. You don't quite measure up if you don't do the right things, say the right things, love the right people, identify in the right way. You don't quite measure up if you don't vote the right way. Now, trust me, I think there's a right way to vote. But that doesn't mean the other people are less than. And yet, this is the world we live in. An empire that tells us a lie, that the other is less than if they don't conform to your way of seeing, viewing, doing, loving. The gospel is fiction when judged by the empire, but the empire is fiction when judged by the gospel. A gospel of love, a gospel of grace, a gospel of mercy, a gospel of forgiveness, a gospel of inclusion. The number 666, there's nothing magical about it. There's nothing scary about it. It's just wrong. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. You're exactly the way God made you. That doesn't mean we can't lose some weight or make improvements on our lives or sometimes make some better choices, but none of those things keep God from loving us. None of those things keep God from including us, and therefore we should act the same. The gospel is that we love, include, welcome everyone, and like Genesis chapter 1, full stop. Story over. That's the kind of God that we come here to be reminded of, and that's the kind of life we are called to live out. What's revealed is that the empire is a lie. And we are called to point that out at every step.
This is Pastor Rob. Thanks for joining us. And again, if you'd like to support this ministry online, simply go to our website and click the Give tab. Have a great week. Peace.